morning, everyone. I think it is morning for all participants. I would
Afternoon here.
It's afternoon, yes, in Barcelona. Yeah, starting the afternoon. Good. So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this new encounter in the series of encounters called Encounters at the Shores of Translation. Here is an encounter at the shores of translation. We are very pleased to welcome another guest speaker from the market of translation, and he will be giving knowledge, practical knowledge to students and novice translators in general, how to make it into the market of translation and perhaps interpreting as well. So the structure of this session will be as follows. Maurice is going to take the floor after this, these introductory remarks for almost 30 or 40 minutes. He will be introducing the 6 S's, or the road perhaps to 6 S's, how to make it as a freelancer. So we are going to see together how to become a successful freelance translator. Then we are going to open it to the Q&A session. We are going to open the Q&A session in which we will be taking questions in rounds, first round, second round, and so on and so forth. So how to make it into the market and as a successful freelancer requires so many skills, requires talents, requires capabilities for and special way of dealing with texts, source texts or the target texts. Reading comprehension skills requires also some cultural knowledge, and also not only these are the linguistics related skills. The freelance translator needs to have also other skills such as good marketing skills, organization. He has to be well organized, and so on and so forth. So as I've told you, we are really very pleased to welcome Andrew Morris to talk about this, and this is an informal exchange on the road to freelancing. Andrew Morris is an experienced an international translator. After a long career in education, Andrew began as a freelance translator in 2009, starting out with agencies, then a few direct clients, and now working almost exclusively with around 80 direct clients. He also plays an important role within the translation community worldwide, and especially online. On behalf of prose.com, he is running groups of almost 37,000 translators on Facebook and 86,000 translators on LinkedIn, where he posts daily with thoughts, reflections, tips, and insights into succeeding as a freelancer, which is the subject he is going to investigate and talk about today. He's going to share with us his thoughts out of his expertise and experience in the market. He's going to share his reflections and practical tips and first-hand insights or fresh insights from the market. Without further ado, I hand it over to you, Maurice. to start the talk and perhaps some introductory remarks. You have the floor, Maurice.
Okay, thank you very much, Hammouda. If I speak at this speed, can you really understand me okay? No problem with my accent. I come from Wales originally, but I lived in many countries around the world as part of my education background. I was 20 years as a teacher and a teacher trainer before becoming a translator. I'm now very old, 55, but I became a translator when I was 45. So I had a whole background out in the world before that. So when I became a translator 10 years ago, I began, like so many people, without any idea of how to really build this. So what I'm going to share with you today is the fruit of looking back from my position today, 10 years, 11 years on how that happened. It wasn't as neat and as sequenced as I'm going to make it seem today. It was a complete mess, sometimes with ups, with downs, sometimes with nothing much happening, sometimes with lots of new breaks and new developments happening in a short time. So like any personal or human or professional development, it's been a very messy thing, but part of my job as an educator is to try and look back at that mess and try and see some of the themes, some of the strategies that helped that career develop. Because as Hammouda said, now 11 years on, I work with about 80 direct clients, mostly from France, because my language is French to English. Even though I live in Spain, my wife is French, so French is the language of my home. And so now I've got these 80 clients, and as Hammouda said, I play a role in the translation community because I work alongside my freelance work. I work for pros.com, as their community manager. So we have a big group on Facebook, which I'll tell you about later, which everybody is welcome to join in order to dialogue and to share ideas and experience with other translators. So the talk is called The Road to Success. Success obviously is meant to sound like success. First of all, is everybody muted or unmuted? Hammouda?
Everybody is muted except you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
yeah.
First of all, let's define what we mean by success before we even start on this road. So it can mean many different things to many different people because we all have different circumstances, different contexts. For some people, success means money, and that's obviously one factor in achieving success. For other people, it's freedom, it's time, it's the ability to do what interests them all day long. And so you might have somebody who is working very hard, 3,000 words per day, considers themselves successful, or you might have somebody who works 2 hours a day and goes out for long walks, like Huda in the countryside, and enjoying that free time and considering themselves successful. Or you might have somebody who only makes $50 a day or a week, but is very interested and loves their work and considers that successful. But in my definition, it's about making enough money to live a comfortable life, working in nice surroundings. I have a big office in my home. It's about doing work that's interesting for me, a team of interesting for myself. Anything that I don't have to do with the law or to do with science, then I give it away to other people who do like it, because there's somebody out there who likes every kind of text. So I work on what I want to work on. I like my clients, and I feel that over the years, I've chosen my clients. Those clients, whether they're agencies or direct clients who don't work in the way that I like working, and slowly we drift apart. So I have enough time. I'm never rushed. I make enough money for me I find my work interesting, and I find the people that I work with interesting. So that, for me, is a definition of success. Now, in order to get there, I've developed this idea of 6S, which I'm now going to share with you. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll be talking through this model. So let me just share the screen first of all. Hammouda?
I made you co-host. You can share now. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, can you all see the screen?
We do, yes. We can.
Okay, so there's my road, a long straight road. In fact, as I said at the beginning, the road is anything but straight. But for today, we'll use this picture, the road to success. Now, why do I call it 6S? Because for me, looking back at this chaotic past and trying to make sense out of it, I can see 6 elements which together work to create this picture of business and personal success that I'm talking about. And what we can see here is a pyramid which looks like every block is separate and every block comes after the previous block. This is only a partial picture of reality because, as I said, these things, and as we see at the end, these things actually all play and intermingle together. But I'll put them in order simply because that makes it easier to present and easier maybe to understand. So the first S is about your ability to do what is required by your job. I wonder if anybody, maybe in the chat, can write which word they think that begins with S represents your ability to do what is required. I'm trying to see the chat here. Stamina, okay, that's more about your personal energy. Stress management is very important, but that's more of an emotional thing. We'll come back to that later. But when we say somebody can do the job, which they say they can do, we say that they have what?
A skill. They are skillful.
Absolutely. Okay, a voice came from out of it. Fine, fine. It's fine by me if we can talk. It's probably easier than chatting. Okay, so it's about skills.
Yeah.
Now, to be a translator, obviously there are different sets of skills which you need in place. You need to be able to understand the language that you're working with and have a very good in-depth knowledge of the language in all its expressions, in its colloquial and its most formal, its everyday and its most academic. Other skills that you need to build on are, for example, the skill of writing. Because as a translator, you're not just understanding the source language, but you need to be an excellent writer in your target language. It depends slightly on which sector you're translating in. If you're translating, as I do, text about arts, about tourism, about film festivals, about social life, you need to be able to write in a way which is engaging and which draws the audience in. If you're translating legal or technical or scientific texts, you need to be able to write clearly and precisely, which might be very different between, for example, French and English. But either way, you need to be able to write, whether it's creative writing or simply clear writing. You also need communication skills, because once you start as a translator and you're out there in the market, you're dealing with people. And it doesn't matter if you're the best linguist in the world. If you have a brain the size of Wikipedia and you know every word in the language, if you can't interact with your clients, and if you can't interact with the people that you might be working with, project managers, other translators, then your work is going to suffer. I know you translate with knowledge and understanding of both languages is absolutely perfect, but their interpersonal skills and their communication skills let them down. So they may be very good translators, but they're also translators without clients or without enough clients. And for me, that isn't success. So between your translation skills, your writing skills, your communication skills, your marketing skills, your technological skills, you don't have to be a geek, a technological wizard to be a translator, but you certainly need to manage your computer, the basic software, the basic CAT tools. So all of these are skills which you need to have mastered even before you go looking for clients. And that's why they're at the bottom of this pyramid, because without those, you won't get very far. Even if you're the nicest person in the world, even if you're charming, even if you're gifted at working with people, if you can't translate or if you can't write, very soon those clients will find out, they'll receive complaints, or they'll see themselves that the work isn't good enough, and then it doesn't matter who you are, they'll drop you, because nobody in translation owes you a living. You get many opportunities, but every time you need to step up and show the people who are giving you money that you're good enough to do the job. And they say often in freelance translation, you're only as good as your last work. Okay. So that if you have a history of doing good texts and you make one mistake, then a client will forgive you. If you make a serious mistake, or if you make serious mistakes twice, then after a short time, the client will walk away and they don't owe you any explanation. So getting the work right and having your skills in the best possible, at the best possible level is a key part of the road to success. Now, let's say that you are a fantastic translator in pure form, that you can write extremely well, that you have all your equipment lined out around you, then you're ready to go, okay? Once you have those, then the next stage is about letting the world know that you are there. Because if nobody knows you're there, you won't get very far. You'll be very gifted, very skilled, but also very poor, because nobody will come to you and pay you to work for them. So what S do you think this is? Each of these words begins with S. So your ways of getting clients. Let me see in the chat. Sponsoring? No, that would be nice if people would sponsor you, but no, it's not that. Well, self-confidence is a personal quality. But here I'm talking about things that, practical things that you can do in order to let people know that you're there. Any guesses? Okay, we'll move on. I'm going to call these strengths. It's not bad. Experience doesn't begin with S. Sell your image. Okay, that's not bad. Selling your image, not bad. Okay, I'm going to call these strategies. Selling your image, strengths is a bit more like skills. So you can put strengths and skills maybe together. Selling your image is one strategy, but strategy is a slightly bigger term. So your strategies are to do with, for example, how you present yourself to the public. If you're working at home, you're very good at what you do, somehow you need to let the public know that you are there. You can do this, for example, through a website. That's a very basic thing, even if it's a simple website, saying who you are, what you do, what are the services you offer, whether it's translation, editing, revising, proofreading, and letting people know how to contact you. That's one very basic strategy. Then, of course, another strategy involves going out looking for clients. one of the ways in which you can do that, especially at the beginning of your career, is through pros.com. Pros.com that I work for is the world's biggest network. Are you all familiar with Pros? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they're an American company. They're the biggest network of translators in the world, with tens of thousands of people who have a profile. And if, as a beginning translator, this is what I did, I set up a profile with my photograph, with a tagline about my skills, and then give a very detailed list of what I could do, which languages I worked from, and a kind of profile, like on any social medium. And then that served to attract certain clients operating within the Pros system. Most of those clients are agencies. Since then, to move on to direct clients, other strategies have involved going to trade fairs, for example, developing an active presence on LinkedIn, and interacting with people who could become my clients. They've also involved simply writing to people and offering my services. They have involved a lot of word of mouth. When you become established as a translator and you want to develop and grow your number of clients, then especially with direct clients, many of them will tell each other about you if you do good work. So these days, I never go looking for clients, but new clients often find me saying, I was recommended by X, or Y gave me your name. So that's a key strategy. You can't really promote word of mouth other than by doing the work and doing it well for year after year. And then people will naturally tell others about you. That's obviously something that takes a little longer. But as a beginner, as a new translator, I would say create a profile on pros.com, which is completely free. Maybe look at other platforms too. I would avoid, personally, platforms like Fiverr or Upwork, because the rates that translators ask for are so low that you're going to be in a competition racing to the bottom. People saying, I will translate your CV for $5, or I will translate your book for $10. And if you follow that road, you'll never make enough money to survive, let alone succeed. Okay. So patience is also a strategy, because these things take time. I would remember one thing which is crucial, which is that a successful translator who makes enough money to live and to enjoy a little bit of free time without racing every day to complete 4,000 words doesn't need 5,000 clients, not even 500 clients, not even 50 clients. You need 6 or 7. If you have 6 or 7 clients sending you work, then you're in a very solid and comfortable position. Obviously, over time, you might want to change those clients as your rate of your situation. You can begin to drop the clients who don't pay you well or who don't pay you quickly as you move up and take on higher clients who pay higher rates. So all of that is part of your strategy. And that's another key part. So you have your skills as a base. And then once you have your skills, you go out and find clients and you decide to contact them or let them contact you, have your website, encourage them to tell other people about yourselves, go looking on different platforms, because it's very important at the beginning of a career to have choices. The problem that many translators get into a lot of the time is that they end up working for 2 or 3 low-paying agencies, and they're working all day like they're running on a wheel simply in order to pay their bills. And they're working from morning till midnight, and they have no time to breathe, no time to look around, no time to to make choices. And that's a key part of being a freelancer, is having that space, having that time to look around and decide, do I want this text or that text? Do I want to work with this client or that client? And those choices make you or help you to leap up the rungs of the ladder until one day you're in a position where you can shape your translation work exactly around the person that you are. Okay. The next S in our 6 S's is the attitude you adopt towards working with and helping your clients. So who can guess in the chat what word this represents? Again, beginning with S. Any ideas? Devotion. Okay. Actually, that's not bad. It's not correct, but it's not bad.
Self-confidence?
Okay, well, that's a personal thing. When you want to help clients, what do we call this? You want to give them what they want and more.
Service?
Service, very good. Okay.
Action.
Okay, so stability, devotion is actually not bad at all. Not correct, not English, but it's a good chance, a good guess. So the next one in our success is service. Now, it's very important that when you go online and you look at what most people say about translation and how to be a successful translator, 99% of what you will find is about skills or strategies. And in fact, of that 99%, about 90% is about strategies. Most people will say, how to become a successful translator? Go on LinkedIn, have an Instagram account, write cold emails, do marketing. All of those things are important. But for me, they represent only one part of the overall 6S picture. Service is a key one. Now, what does service mean when you're working with translation clients? Because surely they have a text, they want you to translate it, you translate it, you give it back to them. And that's it. How can service play a role in this? Well, I think it plays a huge role. If you're working with agencies, your flexibility, your attitude, your ability to create good relationships with the project managers at an agency are crucial. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to stop that call. Let me just put my telephone off. Apologies, Hammouda, I didn't think of putting the phone off.
No problem at all. This is an informal meeting. Don't worry.
Okay, sure. So your ability to create good relationships and to be flexible and help the project managers, not at every moment, not at midnight, not at 2 o'clock in the morning, not necessarily on the weekend, but that kind of service attitude is for me something that's quite crucial, and many translators don't have it. I've met many translators who say, I'm an expert at what I do. The client can ask me to do this translation, but they shouldn't contact me on the weekend. They shouldn't contact me in the evening. They're always telling me what to do. And they see themselves as in opposition, like two adversaries on two sides of a battle line with their clients. For me, from the very beginning, maybe because my father, when I was a boy, my father had a clothes shop, and he taught me, I worked in his shop during the summers, and he taught me how to give good service. It is one of those old-fashioned shops before Amazon, before you could buy everything online. When I was a boy, there was no online, there was no internet. So people would come into the shop and he would give very good service, knowing each person, knowing each person's tastes, and he would treat every one of his customers slightly differently. He knew the ones who wanted to spend money. He knew the ones who didn't want to spend money. If people came in to buy a suit, he could always sell them a tie at the same time. Sometimes when they came in wanting to buy a tie, he sold them a suit at the same time. So he was very skilled in serving people and giving them and making them feel happy. Now, when you work with agencies, that's quite important because you've got project managers who are often working against the clock, who are often under pressure, under stress, and they are looking at a huge number of translators, some of whom are friendly and adaptable, others of whom are very angry and very uncooperative. Which one do you think they're going to choose? They're going to go to the friendly, adaptable ones if they have the same skill level. So whatever I say further up this pyramid should never replace the basic need for skills. As I said, if you can't do the job, if you can't translate, you won't last long. But if you can, these other things on this pyramid are things which can enhance your chances. When you work with direct clients, then service is even more important. Because when you work with direct clients, you're not working for people. Like when you work for an agency, it's usually you working for them. In the world of direct clients, you're often working with your clients. And they might come to you for extra help. They might send you a query about a headline for a magazine 1 minute before they want to publish. They might come to you with work that's urgent on the weekend. They might need reassurance over one question after you've sent the text. They might need you to be flexible. You might want to give them a freebie, so a little bit of free work, maybe with just one paragraph or one sentence now and again. And all of that is part of service. It's all part of the game of working with humans. Because we should never forget one thing. As translators, we think we work with words, and of course, that's our daily job. But above all, we're working with human beings. We're translating ideas written by some human beings for other human beings, and we're working for human beings as our employers. So it's very important to keep that service mentality, which doesn't mean you become a servant, which doesn't mean to say that whatever you do or whatever they ask, you say yes and you drop everything. No. And most clients, in my experience, are quite reasonable. They don't ask you to work between midnight and 6 in the morning. They don't ask you to work on a Sunday because they don't want, on a Friday, maybe in Tunisia, because they don't want to work on the weekend. They don't ask you to do unreasonable things, but they do ask you now and again to go a little bit beyond, this is the job, I've delivered it, now pay me. And those translators who can adopt a service mentality are likely to go further, because I have clients who've been working with me for 10 years, and I know they could find cheaper translators in France, and certainly in India or in Palestine or wherever they want to look around the world. But I'm fairly confident that I could send a list of translators' names to my clients and say, these guys are all cheaper, use them, and they wouldn't. Because they get good service, because they get a friendly, cooperative attitude from me, they get efficiency, they get reliability, and above all, they get speed. And this is very important for me. I answer all my emails in 5 minutes, always have done, especially when they come from clients. If they're just queries from other translators, I might say, I'm busy right now, I'll get back to you later. But when work comes from a client, I drop everything. Even if I'm in the middle of a translation, I'll just send them a message which will say either, thank you for your inquiry, I'll send you the details a little bit later, or simply to answer them, to say, yes, I can do that. If a client says, can you do this text by Wednesday, it's 2,000 words, yes, I can do it. It doesn't have to be a long email. I don't have to say, thank you so much for your kind and generous offer. I just say, yes, I can do it. That's all they need. They don't want to have a long conversation because they're also very busy. But being speedy in France especially, maybe in Tunisia, I don't know, is a vital asset. If I had €1 for every time a client says to me, "Vous êtes très réactif," then I could retire, I could go and live in the Caribbean, because clients really value that. Because every person, every client is dealing with lots of hassles, lots of problems, lots of duties, lots of responsibilities, lots of things on their agenda every single day. And if you can step up quickly and say, yes, I can take that headache away from you, I can do it, and I've done it before, you know that you'll get the work back on Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And if I can do that quickly, then for clients, that's a major headache removed. And if you prove time and time again through consistency that you can do that, then very quickly the client becomes faithful to you forever. It's more difficult to find a client than to keep a client. Finding clients, as I said, you have to go and look around and wait for word of mouth, etc. Once I have a client, then I don't let them go, because I give very good service, very efficient service. And then most people in life are lazy. They don't want to go around looking for a new translator every time they have a new text. They'll come back to the person who did it last time. And they'll come back, even if they have to pay more for me than for my colleague in India, because price isn't the only factor. For certain agencies, it might seem that your rate is the only thing that's important. But for many, many clients, reliability, friendliness, as well as quality are just as important. So the translator with the service mentality will go further than the translator who only has skills and strategies. The next one is another S, which is, once you've got all your skills and your strategies and your service in place, for me, it's very important to consider the people professionally that we keep company with. So what S do you think this is?
Perhaps socializing?
Yeah, that's a part of it, definitely. Any other guesses? Your surroundings. Okay, but socializing, actually, next time I do this talk, I might replace surroundings with socializing, because that's actually better. So socializing, surroundings, when you're a translator, you're working alone. You're working in isolation. And it's often not easy to know how to deal with a lot of issues that come up. Issues around employers, around agencies, around rates, around timing, around how to do this, around technology, all kinds of questions that translators have. Now, when I began, I didn't even know that translators had groups online. For the first 4 or 5 years, I was working in a small village in France, in the south of France, in Provence. And I never ever spoke to another translator except once, one retired old man in a village who his experience was so different. He'd been doing it for a long, long time with old paper dictionaries that very quickly we realized there wasn't much to share, and we talked about politics instead. So that was my only exposure to other translators. After a few years, a translator I was working with said to me, "Go online." I went online and I saw that on Facebook alone, there were many groups of translators. And I saw from the very beginning that there were 2 things, or 3 things. One good thing was that there was a lot of sharing of information. Not so good was there's a lot of negativity, people complaining about clients, about the world, about rates, complaining about everything. And there was a lot of conflict between translators, writing behind their keyboards, saying quite nasty things to each other, because they're safe behind their keyboard and they wouldn't say these things face to face. So when I noticed that, I found that quite disturbing. And very quickly, I began to write different kind of posts in that group that I just joined, saying, what if the problem wasn't the client? What if the problem is in our mind? What if the problem is in our attitude? And I began writing things like that and giving my suggestions on how to be better in service to clients. And a group of translators began to follow what I was saying. That group grew to 6,000 people. And then a few years later, after doing this every day for 6 years now, pros.com came along and they gave me a job saying, we want you to do this as part of our team, and we're going to pay you a nice salary. So obviously, I accepted that job alongside my translation work. So now, after writing for 6 years, now it's become a major part of my job. And I make sure in my translation groups that people speak to each other politely, that there's no racism, there's no sexism. People are allowed to disagree, encouraged to disagree, but never to insult each other. And the groups that I run, and that's why the group that I took over last year went from 21,000 to 37,000 people today, because I've created that atmosphere where people can speak freely but safely, knowing that what they say might be challenged, but will never be shot down. So surroundings, important. If you want to be part of a group of translators who give each other support and where you see a variety of ideas, then I would encourage you to go onto Facebook and look for the translators and interpreters, and in brackets, pros.com group. I write there every day of the year, maybe not always on the weekend, but every weekday, I write a post, people come along and they interact with what I say, and then, of course, they post as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next S because I'm aware a little bit of the time. Am I going over time, Hammouda, or are we okay?
You are okay, so go ahead.
Okay, so another 5-10 minutes, and then I'll wrap up my presentation. The beliefs you have about the skills and what you can achieve in life. I'm going to call this your story. Now, this is a little bit more abstract than skills and strategies, but it's my firm belief that it's extremely important. The kind of story you tell yourself every day when you wake up in the morning about what you can do. I'll give you a couple of examples. The first story is about, for me, is about abundance. There is plenty of work out there. We're not in a competition with other people for just a small amount of work. And I think when you develop that abundance mentality, you begin to relax and you're not competing all the time with everyone else. Another part of the story is that as a freelancer, you are the one who's piloting the ship. Okay. Many freelancers say they are freelancers, but act like employees. Being in charge means about saying, maybe not on the first day, but after you've got 1 or 2 clients, this is the kind of work I want to do. These are the kinds of clients I want to work for. I can say no to work or to conditions that I don't like. So I'm in charge. So this symbol is about being the captain, being in charge, and accepting responsibility for the work that you want to do. Okay. Another part of the story is this Japanese word, which you may have seen in the past, maybe not. Ikigai means a mixture of doing what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. I can send this these slides to Hammouda afterwards if you want to share them around the group, rather than writing everything down. So this is about the belief, my pleasure. This is about the belief that you can create a life as a translator which combines all of these, where you work on texts that you love, things that you think are important, the texts that you're good at, and that you can be paid a good rate. So it's that belief that translation, freelance translation, needn't necessarily be a struggle, but it's perfectly possible to aim for something which makes you really quite happy every day. The next part of the story is about, if you can see in this picture, the man has sculpted a sculpture which looks very much like him, maybe without the glasses. And it's about creating a freelance translation life which looks like you. What does that mean? It means you work with clients who think like you. I work with lots of individual small businesses and individual journalists. They think like me, they're small freelancers. I don't work with huge, big companies. I don't work with people who need 50 languages. I work with people who need French and English, sometimes Spanish or German. So because that's the kind of business that I run. So I'm creating a freelance life which looks like me. The rates are the rates that I want to work for, the text that I want to work on. So I'm not always saying yes to everything, but I'm choosing those things which work for me. The next thing is, if you can see this single penguin on the right, is about standing out from the crowd. Many translators, all working from English or French to Arabic. So it might seem like there's a lot of competition around. So it's very important that either through your specialization or through your business attitude or through the quality of your presentation and of course the quality of your work, that you stand out from the crowd. So it's important to look at everything you can offer. If you're a good writer, then you can also do copywriting. If you're a good details person, you can also do editing. And finding ways in which you are different from other translators, not that everybody is the same, and trying to exploit that in your business building. Just looking at the chart here. Okay, fine. Oh, yes, the next one is about the idea that in the end, everything works out very well. Even when you make mistakes with translation companies, even when you might lose a client early in your career, or when a translation client might not pay you as quickly as you want, everything works out because it's all good learning for you in the end. It's not a good idea to go online and complain continually about these things, because that's one way of making sure the cycle repeats itself. So developing an attitude where you can create a balanced, positive attitude to what's happening as a translator is very important. And finally, an understanding that what happens out there in the world is very much a reflection of what you do. So your attitudes and the way you approach your work will have an impact on the world around you. Just like you can have an impact, if you think about your wife or your husband, when you're in a bad mood, without saying a thing, you can impact the way they feel. Well, the same thing as a translator. If you approach your work with a positive attitude and with this is my job, this is my career, I'm going to create the career I want, if that's your attitude, then you're very likely to see the impact of that in the world around you and to attract towards you clients who support that theory. If you go looking for clients who are negative, if you think all clients are cheats, for example, then it's very likely you'll attract that kind of client to confirm your theory. So that's your story. And the final one, very briefly, is about your mental and emotional well-being. So I'm calling this your state. So for me, the work that we do as translators is not only on the page or on the screen. Maintaining a healthy attitude to life, whether that's through meditation or through yoga or through keeping a healthy work-life balance, is a vital part. We don't often write about this online because we're always writing about skills, strategies, skills. But for me, the attitude that I've explained in story and taking time every day to do a little inner work, going on YouTube and finding people who inspire you outside of translation, thinking about the way you live your life, trying to create a happier home life, better health, because health is a key part of state, what you eat, drinking water, eating well, exercising, meditating, doing yoga, all of these kinds of things are a part of keeping a healthy state. And for me, that's as important as your strategies, your service, or your surroundings. So these are the 6 S's that I've talked about today. But instead of being in a pyramid, I would rather see them in this form, because they're all happening at the same time. You don't finish the skills, then move on to strategies, and leave the state or your story till last. You might argue that you begin with your state and your story, and skills come later. So it's much more probable that this is a more accurate image. All of these things fit together like pieces of a jigsaw, and it's not one after the other like a ladder, but a composite of all of these features. They all begin with S. That's why I've called them 6S. And if you combine all of these 6 things, then for me, that makes the road to success. And I'll stop there, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and we can come back to asking any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really, this is very informative and very useful presentation to novice translators and students. Really, the insights are very fresh and the tips are very practical. So perhaps I would like to throw out some questions, a couple of questions, before I open up the discussion to the floor or the participants. So first of all, you started your presentation by saying that the language of home is French, your language. So how important it is to have mastery of the language when you have that language spoken at home or not. So how much it is helpful for you translating perhaps into French. So this is the first question. The second question I would like to ask has to do with yes, you said that you have to think and to design a sort of freelance translation life that looks like you. But here I would like to ask whether this new freelance translation life is dependent on your online profile, or it is your real and physical world life, your preferences, or it has to look like your profile, for example, in Instagram or Facebook, where you can include your preferences and the way you like and the ways you don't like. So can you elaborate on that more? So do you like we take more questions, or you offer some responses to these questions first?
I'll respond to these first, otherwise I'll never be able to remember if there are 10 questions. So in terms of the language, I would say in general, it's very, very important to have regular exposure. So most of the people here are translating from English to Arabic or from French to Arabic, or both?
Both, yeah.
Okay. So,
et il parle français aussi. Je crois que tout le monde parle français. Oui.
Right. Okay. I would say it's very important to maintain regular contact with the language. I don't think it's necessary to marry somebody from that language, because Those of you who are married would have to get rid of your husbands and go and marry an English or a French person. I'm not giving that advice, okay? But I would say it's very important to have regular contact, whether it's online, whether it's through reading. I lived in France for 9 years before I came to Spain. And I think that it makes me a very different translator from if I'd stayed the whole time in England. I wouldn't say that having a personal relationship in the language and speaking it every day is necessarily what I need for translating, because most of the texts I get are not at the kind of spoken dialogue level. But it's certainly living in France and having access to the news, newspapers and everything every day. Of course, today we can do that with the internet. So I would say whether it's English or French, regular contact with films, Netflix, online, keeping in touch with the culture, keeping in touch with what's going on, whether it's in France or in England or any other, or in America, any other country, is vitally important, because language is constantly changing. Just think of all the words that we have now around COVID, like confinement. Confinement didn't exist 6 months ago. Well, it existed, but not in the same sense. So it's very important to keep up with this. And what are French people saying? What are English people saying? A lot of French clients, when they send me an English text, they think it's confinement. Whereas, of course, in English, we talk more about lockdown. So keeping in touch with those things is important. In terms of designing a profile, I don't necessarily mean your physical online profile, your pictures and that kind of thing. Of course, they should be professional. Whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, if you're trying to set out as a freelance translator, you need an image which is consistent, which doesn't show you, I don't know, dancing on the beach or whatever. It shows you as a professional, because you need to be aware that people will see you, that people will be looking at you, even on Facebook. So I have a personal page on Facebook, which I'm very active on, but I'm always aware that it's visible. So I'll never write things which are really personal to me, for example. But when I talk about designing and thinking about your career, I'm thinking about more what happens inside your head. We need to decide, do we want to be working all day? Do we want to be working for low rates, or do we want to have few clients and work for higher rates? Do we want to tackle every text, or do we want to specialize in certain texts? Do we want to work on weekends or not? Do we want to work with agencies or direct clients? Do we want to work only with environmental texts, or do we want to work with every kind of text? So those are the kind of decisions which you can try to make at the beginning. You may not have as many choices at the beginning as you do later in your career. So now it's very common for me to decide, I don't think I want to do that work today. And I can just say no to the client, because I know that there are more clients coming the next day or around the corner. So those choices develop as your career develops. So it's more about having a clear idea of where you would like to get you in your head. And then maintaining, yes, a professional, smart profile on your website, LinkedIn especially, on Facebook, maybe a little bit less, because Facebook isn't primarily professional, but on Instagram, especially if you have yourself as a translator on Instagram.
Thank you. We take the floor now. We have Muhammad Salah Isa. Who else? Let me. And then Nada bin Aoun. Yes. Nada. So, and then Yusra Gharbi, Afef Boujama'a. Okay, so let's start with Muhammad Salah. Go ahead, please.
Greetings, Mr. Hammouda. Greetings, Mr. Andrew. I've actually joined the Pros Facebook group 5 months ago, and I see many of your posts and other professionals out there discussing issues such as the late payment by firm or company, low rates, marketing, social networking, and so on. So my question is as follows. Should the translator create his own website, and is it worth investing in? And when is the right time to do so? should you really be economic with the budget? For instance, should we refrain from hiring a professional graphic designer, etc.? And which option should we go for? A customized website or a pre-made version such as WordPress and so on? And I got one last question, which is, do you think creating a multilingual or bilingual blog is a good idea to promote one's skills and image as a translator and a writer? Thank you, sir.
Okay, a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
So the answer about should we have a website? Yes. I think even at the beginning of your career, I had a website before I translated my first word, because it might not necessarily attract clients at the beginning, but when you can write to an agency and say, this is my website, and point them to something which is smart, even if it's very simple, then to me, as somebody who occasionally gets requests from translators for me to give them work, to see that somebody has a smart, simple website shows me something about their quality, even if they're beginning. It shows me that they're thinking in a business way, doesn't prove anything about their ability to translate. But if you have two translators, both can translate, one has a website, then that one has an advantage. In terms of whether it should be professionally designed, I would say at the beginning it's best to go to any one of those many sites like Wix or the others where you can create using a template, because that's much cheaper. And a professional website can cost you, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 euros. That's a lot of money for a translator to spend at the beginning of their career. But you can get very beautifully designed templates for which you only have to pay maybe $50 a year to sign up and then publish that. So I would say at the beginning, is that. As to whether you should have it in two languages, definitely. But if you're going to publish a website with a French and an Arabic and an English page, you must ask a colleague or translator either whether you want to pay them or not, but to proofread what you've written in English. Because I'm sure your English is fantastic, but unless it's your native language, you absolutely want to avoid having any errors. Because having errors on a translator's website is like walking into a restaurant and finding that the tablecloth is dirty. It makes you want to turn around and walk straight back out again. So by all means, have an English page, a French page, but it must be proofread. You can ask in a group like mine on Facebook, you can ask if there's anybody who's prepared to help you. And usually you'll find somebody might say to you, you should be paying for this. That's fine. But at the same time, you'll always have somebody who will say, sure, I'll help you. And if they're a native speaker, then that's fine. So I hope I answered all of Mohammed's questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We move on to Neda Benoun now.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Mr. Morris for the insightful lecture. My question is the following. Are there other platforms other than pras.com for novice interpreters or translators as we are? And I've tried to work on to get small jobs on Upwork. Even with the low rates, I didn't get anything. I don't know, maybe there are some procedures or steps to follow. I wanted to have an experience on this website, but still it wasn't very successful. Thank you very much.
There are others. I know that Upwork and Fiverr exist. There's one called Linguist Cafe. But obviously, I'm working for pros. They pay my salary, so it's my job to say that they are the best choice. They're certainly the biggest choice, and they're the most established. They're the only group which is exclusively for translators, because Upwork, you can get everything done on Upwork. You can have pictures drawn or films made. And the problem with those big sites like Upwork and Fiverr is that there are thousands of people who are unqualified, who don't have the same experience in education that you have, all competing for the same work. And that not only decreases your chances of getting the work, but it also brings the rates right down. Because if you've got 50 people waiting on every street corner to do your work, then you can easily say, I'll give you $1. And everybody will say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Which isn't the situation that you want to be in as a professional translator. So even if it hurts a little bit or you need to be more patient, I would say if you get into that cycle, working with those kind of rates, if you can find a job, then you'll be on that cycle forever. Because there's no way you can make enough money, just have the time to stop and look around. You'll be caught on a wheel, and you may well be doing that for a long time, just trying to survive. So it's best to join a professional platform and when people join pros.com, they can create a profile, but so many people don't complete their profile. They put in their name, maybe no photograph, maybe nothing about their experience. If you complete a good profile and you give good details about yourself and you help yourself to stand out, and there's so much help. When you join pros.com, it's very easy to get help from the staff on how to build up your profile. And that in the longer term will give you a much better chance of finding your first work. And once you find your first work, you'll find a second one. And then there's a spiral of confidence which kicks in and which is likely to lead you up the ladder of a freelance career faster.
Yusra Gharbi.
Hi, Sir Andrews. Thank
Hi.
you for the light and informative talk. I want to ask you something. I often see that in the PROS Facebook group that there are people who are saying I can translate from English to Arabic and vice versa, and professionals do not like that, vice versa. So why is it that? Is it not professional to say that?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Another question, may I ask? Okay. Do you think one could have like good opportunities from translating from foreign language to their native language?
Okay. Well, the vast majority of translators in the major languages translate into their mother tongue only. For example, I speak French. I lived in France for 9 years, but I would never personally translate into French. I can write very correct French, and often when I'm in France, I'm shocked by the mistakes that French people make when they write in French. L'orthographe, that kind of thing, is often terrible. But I don't have the ability to write like a French person. So that's why most people in those major languages promote translating into your mother tongue over both ways. However, there are many combinations of languages, and Arabic is probably one of that group where there are simply not that many people who speak Arabic who can translate into French if they're not from an Arabic background, from an Arab background. So for languages like Bulgarian or Swahili in Africa, or Vietnamese, or Latvian, or Moroccan Arabic, Darija, or Wolof in Senegal, well then of course in those languages, most of the translators will be working both ways because there's simply not enough people who speak Latvian who are native English speakers. Now, Arabic is in the middle because it's a major language, but still, there are relatively few students of Arabic in the West. And so in your situation, it's much more likely that you'll end up doing both ways because there's simply not that many people around who know Arabic well enough but come from an English or a French background. So people are very protective. And when you see this in the Facebook group, you can see people saying, no, you should only ever translate into your mother tongue. But most of those people are English, American, German, French, Spanish. And they have very good knowledge of English, so they translate only into Spanish. Whereas in languages like Arabic, I would suggest that it's a much more balanced picture. And it's perfectly fine to translate into French for you, because the market needs people who can translate from Arabic into French, and there's simply not that many people out there. So I think these are not iron principles which never change. It depends on the context, it depends on the demand, it depends on the country, and it depends on the languages involved.
Excellent. So Andrew, you are exposed to Catalan and Spanish. Are you translating also from these two languages?
Well, I learned Spanish when I came. I only came here 3 years ago, and now I speak Spanish pretty well. I'm learning Catalan. I'm at a fairly beginner level in Catalan because I wanted to concentrate on Spanish in my first 3 years. And Catalan and Spanish are actually quite similar.
Yes.
And learning two similar languages at the same time is very tricky, as I'm beginning to discover.
But Catalan is very similar to French also. Catalan.
It is, which makes it both easier to learn and more difficult, because then it creates all kinds of interference in your mind. So
yeah,
it's an advantage. For example, the word for encore is ancora.
Ancora, yeah.
But when you're speaking Spanish, it's todavía. And sometimes when I'm speaking Spanish, I say ancora. When I'm speaking Catalan, I say todavía. So it can, the fact that they're similar helps you to learn on paper, but also creates all kinds of...
Yes. And there is another problem with faux amis, false friends also sometimes.
Absolutely.
Actually and actuellement. Yeah. Okay, Afef Boujama, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for this meeting. Thank you for the interesting topic, Mr. Andrew and Mr. Hammouda. So my question is as follows. As novice translators or novice freelancers, can we start by accepting low rates, or should we only accept to be paid well even when starting? And if it is okay to let us know about the rates in the market nowadays. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question again.
Good question, yes.
First of all, we need to define low. In France, a direct client, and I have all direct clients, will pay usually 15 or 16 cents per word. Some will pay much more if you work at the very top. But it seems to me, after my experience, that the average client is quite happy to pay that. Agencies, therefore, will take that money and they will pay often maximum 10, more often 9, 8, 7, 6 cents to a translator. 6 seems low to me. If you're a beginning translator, if you're a single mother, you've got 2 children, and there's 5,000 words at that rate, then you'll take it. So the idea of low isn't an absolute mathematical calculation. It depends on where you're starting from, how much you need to work, whether your husband or your wife is producing a second income. If you ask me in pure theory, I would say it's best to find out what is the average rate in your market and to go for that. So if you find out in France, it's between 6 and 10. 6 for a beginning translator and 10 cents per word for an established translator, then the minimum I think you should be asking is 6. Now, obviously, in the Tunisian market, it's a different rate. But to ask for 3 or 2, if you're desperate, I did it once at the beginning of my career. I took on a job because I had no work at the beginning. So I started off from 0 after a long career in education. When I began as a translator, I had no income, no clients. And somebody offered me a big tourist text for 3 cents a word. And I knew that 7 or 8 was the starting point. I took it. I took it because the option was doing nothing and just staring at my computer, waiting for the sky to send me some work. And I didn't want to do that. So I took it. But at the same time, I knew it was a low rate and I felt a little bit miserable. And it began to feel too much like hard work, and I wasn't being paid what I deserved. And by the time I finished that text, which was about 8,000 words, I said, never again. But my situation was as somebody who came from a career where I earned a lot of money and I had some money in the bank. So I could afford to say, no, this is my rate, and that's what I want. If I was bringing up 2 children on my own, then that's a decision which would be much more difficult to make. So in general, find out the average and try and go for that. In extreme circumstances, then you know how much money you need. If you have to pay an electricity bill next week and you need the money, then you'll do it. But do it once and keep on asking yourself, how am I feeling? Does this feel right? Is it good? Do I feel happy? Because there's not much point doing a career if you're feeling miserable. And that will probably impact the work that you do, and it'll be a vicious cycle. So I would say, keep asking yourself those questions, but there's no black and white rule.
Yeah, again, pricing is also, perhaps you need to have a whole strategy for pricing, and whether you need to include your pricing strategy or summarize it in a grid of prices, depending on so many factors. One of the factors also is the volume of work that you expect from that client or in that particular project, means the word count. So if the word count is high, then you can go down a little bit with prices. So do you experience also this, Andrew, that if, for example, you are offered a project of, let's say 120 pages of 250 words per page. So would you also take that into account and reduce, because the effort also of investing in a 3-page project is perhaps at the beginning the same as investing in 1,000, because you are going to deal with the same jargon, with the same terminology and the same work. So can you please elaborate on that, and whether you also, it is also good and sound methodology to have that grid of prices that are stable, and you will be sending also some messages to your clients of that you are professional and you know what you are doing, and also a sort of predictability by your clients. So this is the price, and you can detail the pricing grid into, for example, rush work, regular work, technical, non-technical, volume, whether, for example, work less than 10 pages, more than 10 pages, 100 pages, etc. So is it a good strategy and a sound methodology, this one, Andrew?
I think it's certainly, well, first of all, to answer the first question, I never offer a discount for volume. If some clients really put their foot down and ask for it, then I might. But I never kind of say, oh, thank you for your 120 pages. Let me offer you a 10% discount. Because for me, the work involved and the time involved doesn't change. If there's a client, but actually in the world of direct clients, in the world of agencies, people will often ask. And again, it's up to you to choose whether to accept a discount based on how much work you have, how much choice you have at that time. But in my direct client world, nobody ever asks for discounts. They have a big budget for translation. And one thing which is very important with direct clients is that agencies will ask you for a price per word. With direct clients, when I send an invoice, I just send them a total. Now, in my head, that total is based on 5,000 words, 15 cents a word, so 750 euros. But all I write is the translation of this text. I don't write the word count. Translation of this text into English, 750 euros. And none of my clients ever say, how did you calculate that? Because their translation for them is just one line on a budget. And if you say to them, this text will cost you 400 euros, they either say yes or no, but they don't say 400 euros, but it's 4,000 words. So why isn't it? I never have that kind of discussion. Agencies might do that. So with agencies, you might want to reduce if you need to for volume. In terms of the grid that you mentioned, I think it's a very good idea, but it should remain in your head. I never share pricing strategy with clients because I charge different things to different clients. It all depends on how much, basically, how much I think they will pay. They don't vary wildly, but I have some clients who are higher up in the market, for jewelry, for example, who will pay more because they really need creative work and they need it tomorrow. And then other clients who have a regular volume of work, or other clients who are individuals and some who are corporates. So all of these things, in my mind, determine, but the price will go between 15 and let's say 18, sometimes 19 or even 20 per word. But I never say to those clients, these are my prices, because prices can change. Because if you give a project price, which is just a total, it can go up if they want it by tomorrow. If it's a difficult text, it can go up. But I never say, it's gone up because this is difficult. I say, this is the price. It might be a text which usually costs 500 euros, but if it's by tomorrow and difficult, and it's a PDF, then I might just put 650 euros on the invoice, and they never come back and say, what happened? Because most people, when you have a good working relationship, as long as you don't abuse that relationship, they're happy to pay you what they always pay you. It goes to the accountant, and they don't look at it with a magnifying glass. They simply pay. And of course, I would never double it, because that would probably get noticed. But within a reasonable margin. So it's good to have those ideas, like you say, for technical, non-technical, volume, high volume, low volume, but only to keep them in your head and share them maybe with your colleagues.
Excellent. May I ask you something else? Perhaps I allow myself to abuse our relationship and friendship and ask you something. Would you be kind to offer my students with sort of templates that you perhaps, I know you have created your own documentation, like invoices or letters to your client doing marketing and selling your story, as you mentioned it, or quotations. So I think these documents are of paramount importance to novice translators to look professional and to start a very healthy, let's say, professional life. Is it possible with the presentation you offered kindly to share with us, to share also any other? Of course, you are going to weed out any information related to privacy or confidentiality and so on, but just a template, because they might find something when they search the internet, some templates, but they are of a general nature, not specific to freelance translators. Can you help them with those templates or samples?
I can certainly send an invoice. I don't have samples now because I've been working with most of my clients for so long, and then we only email each other. So I'm not actually, I never go looking for new clients. All the new clients I get, they come to me through word of mouth. And so at the beginning, maybe 10 years ago, I had a few standard emails saying, I'm a translator, this is what I offer, these are my services. I have my website, which I'm happy to share, obviously. But I'll have a look, see if I can find any of those templates.
Thank you. Sure. Yeah. So we have now Wisal Khlifi. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Andrew. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and here with us. So my question goes to you both, Dr. Salhi and Mr. Morris. You mentioned something about specializing in certain fields in translation. And I read for James Nolan, and he argues that you shouldn't actually specialize in a field unless you know for sure that you're going to be working for a firm, for the rest of your life. Otherwise, it's pointless because you might somehow, when translating in other fields, you might find other fields that are that feel like home for them, you know? You feel so comfortable translating in those fields. So what do you actually, I don't want to say what do you think is better, but what do you recommend? You know, you're man of experience, and so what do you recommend? What do you have to say about this?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, the word specialization has two meanings for translators. One is those people who've been practicing law, or as pharmaceutical specialists or doctors, who then become translators. They are, in a way, the true specialists, maybe with a capital S. And of course, people who come from that kind of background are going to say specialization needs 20 years of experience. And of course, they're right if they're dealing with very specific pointu material, really high level. Most translators claim to be specialists, but more often than not, it's because they've done lots of texts in a certain area. So I said at the beginning, I specialize in tourism, not because I had 20 years experience, but because I did a lot of texts that were connected with tourism. So it depends which meaning. I mean, I would never go up to a pharmaceutical translator who spent 20 years working in Pfizer and compare my specialism to his. But it's perfectly possible if you've done lots of environmental texts and you've built up a glossary and you've done lots of research to claim that you specialize in those texts without claiming to be an environmental scientist. So it depends which meaning. I suspect that James Norman you were reading is defending the first kind of specialization, but it's perfectly possible, I think, to say I specialize in without claiming to be a specialist. I can take maybe two more questions because
Yes.
at 1:45 I'm going to need to go.
Yes, excellent. And I'll answer you later, Wisal, for the question, because it is tricky for me also, specialization. We will take Salsabil and Shayma and Wa'il Ben Ali. Can we take them on one go and then you answer them? Very briefly, please, one question each. And I will help you with the questions later if you forget them. Salsabil, go ahead, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Hammouda and Mr. Morris. My question is the following. Okay, how can a freelancer check the two following details when he's practicing the job for the first time, which are first, the credibility of the company for which he is working, I mean, whether they will pay him for his work and effort. The second detail is the best and suitable price for his effort that is suitable for his work. And thank you.
Thank you. Shayma Gizani.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Andrew. Earlier in service, we mentioned the flexibility and maintaining a positive attitude, but you also mentioned to not be a servant and to say no when it's needed. My question is, when exactly to say to your client no without being brutal and rude?
Thank you. Wa'il Ben Ali, last but not least.
Hello, Mr. Andrew.
Hi.
It's a pleasure having you with us today. Well, you know, on many platforms, the first and actually the most important step to get a job is to submit a proposal. Do you have any instruction and recommendations on how to write a successful proposal? And
do you mean quotation or proposal?
Proposal for the job, because some clients always demand a proposal before giving the job.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try and cover these 4 things. How do you check the credibility of clients? Well, in pros.com, there's something called the Blue Board, which is a list of agencies around the world. It's free. If you're a member, you can see every agency is marked out of 5. And you can see the marks, even if you're not a paying member. If you want to read the comments, you need to be a paying member. But that's the most recognized place in the industry to go and put in the name of a company and see what other translators have said about that company. You can also ask in a Facebook group, if you're given a translation to do by, I don't know, Maghreb Translations, and you've never heard of them before, you can go in the group and say, hey guys, does anybody else know about this company? My experience is that the vast majority of clients are honest and do pay. So it's very important as we enter the industry not to have the impression that every client, I'm not saying this is your case, but that every client is out there trying to take money off us and cheat us. I would say the vast majority of clients that I've met in my life are honest and they pay reasonable rates and they pay on time. There are unfortunate exceptions now and again. So checking credibility on the blue board, pros.com/blueboard. Price and suitability, well, the best thing is to ask around. That's why groups of translators are very useful. To ask for what is the average price in our market at this time. Then you can move it up or down depending on how comfortable you're feeling and how necessary this work is for you. But it's always good to find out, you should have a clear idea of what most people in your country will pay for this combination or that combination. And then you base your offer on that. Usually, if you're beginning, you might want to go at the lower end of the accepted range, but not much below it, unless you really, really, really need the work. When to say no, that's a good question. With direct clients, my policy is to say yes and to make it happen. So even if I don't take on the work myself, I'll go out and find other translators in my team who can do it for me. And if I can't, then my job is to try and find a solution for that client. Because a direct client can lead to thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of euros of work over the years. So the last thing I ever want to say is, no thanks, I don't want to do that, I'm not interested, go and look elsewhere. I will find a solution for them. So that's the service. Doesn't necessarily mean I do all the work myself. When it comes to agencies, when you're building up agencies, you make an extra effort to say yes as much as you can. But if that means working all night and not seeing your family for 2 weeks, then you say no. So it's up to each of us to have this kind of level of what is acceptable, how much am I prepared to do, and where is my red line. And when a job offer crosses the red line, when it's not well paid, or when the conditions are not good, that's when I say no. So it's impossible to give a standard red line for everyone. It's just important for each of us to understand that saying yes in terms of service will get us more work. Saying yes to every possible rate will leave us exhausted. So we need to work out what happy balance between serving but not respecting ourselves. So there's no fixed rule for that. But just to remember, we are freelancers, we're not employees. We don't have a boss telling us, you must do this, you must do that. The whole point of being a freelancer is to be able to make choices. But the more you can say yes, the more clients you have. The more clients you have, the more choices you have. Then you can begin to say no. And you can say no in many ways. You can say, I'm sorry, this is not my expertise. You can say, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I'm busy till next week. And they might say, okay, well, we'll keep the text for you next week. Probably not at the beginning of your career, but sometimes that happens to me. And I'll say, I'm really sorry, I'm busy until 2 weeks from now. And they'll say, okay, we'll hold the text. But that's what happens when you become a bit more established and when you have regular clients. So the more you say yes, the more chances you have later to say no. And I think at the beginning, it requires a little bit of extra effort, a bit of extra sacrifice in order to be able to build up that choice. And finally, I would say when answering an ad online, that you need to read very carefully what people are asking for. You'd be amazed to see how many translators, when you ask for French to English, 2,000 words in architecture, how many people will write and say, hello, I speak good Arabic. Or, hello, I don't know architecture, but I'm really good at agriculture. Things like that. And it's very easy for me when I put an advert, or when I used to put adverts on a page saying, I need a translator for a biology text, 10,000 words for Monday. Please put in the title of your email, biology translation. Then if I got 50 applications, 48 would forget or would not read the instructions. So I would say when you're writing a proposal, when you're answering an ad, look very carefully at the detail. Make sure you answer all of the points. Don't bring in irrelevant information about your children or about your hobbies or whatever. And don't apply to things which are not within your skill area, just because you have the same language, or just because you're free, or just because you need work. It's best to target your proposals very carefully and answer in brief, concise form, saying, I've worked on this kind of text before. I have a lot of experience in this. My skills are this. I've worked on A, B, and C, maybe not naming clients, but the types of text you've worked on, and making sure that your answer is very carefully tailored to the question. Okay,
Thank
so
you
that's all from me.
very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the opportunity to talk to us and to hear your insights and practical tips and your vision on how to make it as a successful freelance translator.
My pleasure.
This was indeed an eye-opening opportunity for students.
Good, and I'm very happy to see so many active people and so many strong women in the profession.
Thank you.
I've done a few talks before where only men have asked questions, but today it's very good to see lots of women asking questions.
This is Tunisia, Andrew.
Yes.
Most of my students are female students.
Okay.
So women, the future is for women here in this part of the world.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much again. We have another opportunity, another encounter as part of this series of encounters, encounters at the shores of translation with another guest speaker. Sarah Laviusa is going to speak to us in almost 1 hour, 10 minutes. She will be investigating pedagogical translation as a cross-linguistic mediation. Thank you very much and see you in a while.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye-bye,
again.
everyone.
Bye.